You're listening to the TOEFL podcast, number 27. This is the TOEFL podcast, episode 27. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff McQuillan, coming to you from the Center for Educational Development in beautiful Los Angeles, California. To get more information about this podcast and for a script of the podcast, go to our website at www.TOEFLPod, that's TOEFLPod.com. Today we're going to listen to a lecture about marketing. And as usual, after we listen to the lecture at a slow rate of speech, we'll talk about it, listen to it again at a normal rate of speech, and ask a few comprehension questions. Let's get started. During the next few weeks, we will be learning about the basic principles of marketing, from conceiving the idea for a product to developing it based on market research, to promoting its sale. If you all read the assignment for last night, you should already know we have an idea about what we will be discussing today. What is marketing? The Chartered Institute of Marketing defines it as the, quote, management process of anticipating, identifying, and satisfying customer requirements profitably, unquote. This definition describes modern marketing because only recently have the needs and wants of the consumer played a part in influencing marketing strategy. It has only been in the last half-decade or so, in fact, that companies have based their product development on market research. Before market research was developed, companies produced whatever goods they felt were most useful, but left it up to the salespeople to find the best ways to sell those goods to consumers. Two items we will be using frequently in our discussions over the coming weeks are acquisition and base management. These terms describe two key parts of marketing strategy. Acquisition refers to the process of acquiring new customers through advertising, promotions, and product placement. Base management refers to the process of maintaining relationships with existing customers, as well as identifying other products they need through interacting with those customers. One of the chapters I assigned for today was the introduction to advertising. As you would have read, advertising is a crucial part of marketing. Advertising plays a major part in the acquisition process, and it is probably the part of marketing that you, as young consumers, have most come into contact with. Advertising and promotion are part of today's basic marketing strategy, but they fly in the face of classical economic theory, which operates on the idea that supply and demand are not dependent on one another. If the supplier of a good promotes that good, they are in essence telling the consumer, or demand side of the equation, what it is they want to consume. Supply is trying to influence demand. Some critics argue that this perverts the ideal free market. Today's TOEFL podcast comes from a lecture on marketing. This is a business class lecture, and the lecture begins by the professor saying that during the next few weeks, we're going to be learning about the principles, the basic principles of marketing. A principle, Principle, is a concept or an idea. So the basic principles are the most important principles, most important ideas of a topic. In this case, the topic is marketing. The professor continues, they're going to talk about these principles from conceiving the idea for a product to developing it based on market research to promoting its sale. That use of from and to is common in English sentences when you are trying to describe a variety or a range of possibilities. And in this marketing lecture, one of the basic principles has to do with conceiving the idea for a product. To conceive as a verb, Conceive, means to think of, to come up with, to invent, to originate. That is to conceive an idea. So you come up with or you invent an idea for a product. And a product in business is something that you are selling. If it's a physical thing, we usually call that a good, Good. If it's something you do for someone, we call that a service, Service. A product can be a good or a service. They're also talking about developing these products based on market research. Market research means that you go out and you ask people, you investigate what people like and don't like. That's part of market research. Finally, the course is going to talk about promoting the sale of the product. To promote as a verb, Promote, means to encourage or to try to increase in this case. The professor continues by giving a definition of marketing. He says, what is marketing? Then he gives a definition which he is taking from an organization. This organization is called the Chartered Institute of Marketing. We know that he's taking it directly from them because he begins the definition by saying, quote, and at the end of it he says, unquote. That means that he's reading the actual words from this other organization's definition. So the definition is, quote, management process of anticipating, identifying, and satisfying customer requirements profitably, unquote. Basically what he's saying here is that marketing is about trying to find out what people want and give that to them. The last word in the definition is profitably, Profitably. This comes from the word profit, which means the money that you make in a business. After you take all of the money that you spend and all the money that you bring in from customers, the difference is your profit. Or if you spent more than you received, than you sold, then you have a loss. But of course, you want to have a profit, not a loss. At least most businesses do. The professor goes on to say that the definition of marketing that he gave describes modern marketing, that is, things in a recent years. Because, he says, only recently have the needs and wants of the consumer played a part in influencing marketing strategy. The needs, what people need, and their wants. Notice that those are nouns. We normally think of need and want as a verb, but here they're using them as nouns. The needs and the wants, the things that you need and the things that you want. The consumer, consumer, is the person who buys something from you, either a good, a product, or a service. The idea of influencing marketing strategy means that it affects marketing strategy. The professor continues by saying that it has only been in the last half decade or so. Half decade comes from the word decade, D-E-C-A-D-E, which is 10 years. So a half decade would be 5 years. Well, only in the last half decade have companies based their product development on market research. When we say you base something on something else, we mean that you start by looking at the ideas in one area and you build upon them, or you go and take those ideas even further. So here, basing product development on research means that you look at the research, the investigation first, and depending on what you find, you then develop your product, your good or service. The professor says that before market research was developed, companies produced whatever goods they felt or they believed were most useful, but left it up to salespeople to find the best ways to sell those goods to consumers or to customers. The expression to leave something up to someone means that they didn't worry about that part of it. They let someone else do it. In this case, they left it up, or they left it to the salespeople, the people selling the product, to find the best way to sell those products. Two terms the professor says that are often used in the discussion of marketing are acquisition and base management. Acquisition comes from the verb to acquire, A-C-Q-U-I-R-E. Acquisition, or rather, to acquire means to get, to receive. So acquisition would be getting, in this case, customers. Base management is taking care of the customers you already have. So acquisition is getting new customers. Base management is taking care of the customers you already have. Both of these are part of your marketing strategy. A strategy, S-T-R-A-T-E-G-Y, is your method or the way that you do something. So acquisition is getting new customers. You can get them by advertising. You can also get them by something called product placement. Product, you know, placement, P-L-A-C-E-M-E-N-T, means when you put something somewhere. And usually we're talking about television programs or movies where your product is seen. So you go and watch a movie, famous movie, and you see a Coca-Cola bottle. Well, that's called product placement. Companies often pay extra so that their product appears in the TV or movie production. Base management, as I said before, means maintaining relationships or taking care of your customers, your existing customers, the ones you have already, as well as trying to find new things that they might want by interacting with them. To interact, I-N-T-E-R-A-C-T, means to talk to or to communicate with. The professor at the end of his lecture says that one of the chapters he assigned for that day was an introduction to advertising. Advertising is letting other people know about your product by putting a commercial in a television program or an ad in a newspaper, an advertisement in a newspaper, advertisement to advertise, advertising, all those three words are related. Well, the professor says that advertising is a crucial part of marketing. When we say something is crucial, C-R-U-C-I-A-L, we mean very important, absolutely necessary for something. So advertising is very important. It is necessary as a part of marketing. The professor says that advertising plays a major part. To play a part means that it is involved in. To play a major part, major here means very important, similar to crucial. The professor ends his lecture by saying that advertising, as part of the basic marketing strategy, flies in the face of classical economic theory. When we say something flies in the face, or they fly in the face, we mean that it is opposite. It has a completely different idea or a different concept, that it shows that this other idea is wrong or false. So today's marketing strategy, the professor says, flies in the face of classic economic theory. Classic, or classical, they say here, has to do with something which usually is old and everyone considers to be the most correct or the traditional way of doing something. Economic theory is related to ideas or concepts about how people buy and sell things, how the economy works. The professor says that the classical economic theory says that supply and demand are not dependent on each other. Supply, S-U-P-P-L-Y, is the idea of you giving products, you selling products, and demand, D-E-M-A-N-D, means that consumers or customers buy those products. So what people buying things is the demand, and companies selling things is the supply. Well, the classical economic theory said these two were not dependent on each other. That just means that they weren't related. One didn't cause the other. They didn't depend on each other. The professor says that when a company tries to promote or advertise its product, they are in essence telling the consumer what they should buy. The expression in essence is very similar to basically, or the most important idea here is. In essence means in other words, the basic idea. So they are in essence telling the consumer, they are in fact telling the consumer what to buy. This, some critics argue, according to the professor, perverts the ideal free market. To pervert, P-E-R-V-E-R-T, means to change something in a very negative or bad way. The free market is the idea that people can buy and sell things freely without having interference from the government. Now let's listen to this lecture, this time at a native rate of speech. During the next few weeks, we'll be learning about the basic principles of marketing, from conceiving the idea for a product to developing it based on market research to promoting its sale. If you all read the assignment for last night, you should already have an idea about what we will be discussing today. What is marketing? The Chartered Institute of Marketing defines it as the, quote, management process of anticipating, identifying, and satisfying customer requirements profitably, unquote. This definition describes modern marketing because only recently have the needs and wants of the consumer played a part in influencing marketing strategy. It's only been in the last half decade or so, in fact, that companies have based their product development on market research. Before market research was developed, companies produced whatever goods they felt were most useful, but left it up to salespeople to find the best ways to sell those goods to customers. Two terms we will be using frequently in our discussions over the coming weeks are acquisition and base management. These terms describe two key parts of marketing strategy. Acquisition refers to the process of acquiring new customers through advertisings, promotions, and product placement. Base management refers to the process of maintaining relationships with existing customers, as well as identifying other products they need through interacting with those customers. One of the chapters I assigned for today was the introduction to advertising. As you would have read, advertising is a crucial part of marketing. Advertising plays a major part in the acquisition process, and it is probably the part of marketing that you, as young consumers, have most come in contact with. Advertising and promotion are part of today's basic marketing strategy, but they fly in the face of classical economic theory, which operates on the idea that supply and demand are not dependent on one another. If the supplier of a good promotes that good, they are in essence telling the consumer, or demand side of the equation, what it is they want to consume. Supply is trying to influence demand. Some critics argue that this perverts the ideal free market. Now let's answer a couple of comprehension questions. Question number 1. How has market research changed marketing? A. After market research was developed, companies could fire salespeople who were not good at their jobs. B. Because of the development of market research, advertising is no longer useful. C. After market research was developed, companies could make decisions about products based on what customers wanted. Or D. It is too soon to tell. Market research was only developed a few years ago. The correct answer is C. After market research was developed, companies could make decisions about products based on what customers wanted. That is, now a company didn't have to guess. They would know what customers wanted. The other three answers are all incorrect. The first answer about companies could fire salespeople doesn't really relate to the lecture. We talk about salespeople as the people who used to be responsible for marketing a product and deciding how to sell it. Now with market research, the company takes a more scientific approach. Answer B is also incorrect because it says advertising is no longer useful, but advertising is mentioned several times at the end of the lecture as an important part of marketing today. Answer D is also incorrect. It is too soon to tell. Market research was only developed a few years ago. Well, it is true that market research is somewhat new. However, the lecture implies that there is definitely an importance, and we know the importance of market research. It's helping companies figure out or find out what customers want. The second question. In marketing, the term acquisition means A. Attracting new customers, B. Acquiring other companies, C. Selling advertisements to television, or D. Talking with your existing customers. The correct answer is A, attracting new customers. Remember, to acquire means to get. An acquisition in marketing means getting new customers. Now, the term acquisition in other parts of business theory may mean getting new companies. Answer B. But in marketing, the way the professor talked about it, it's getting new customers. It's not related to advertisements. And it's not talking to your current or existing customers. That would be base management. The script for today's podcast was written by Katrina Carrasco. That's all we have time for on today's TOEFL podcast. Remember to visit our website at TOEFLPod27 for more information about this podcast. From Los Angeles, California, I'm Jeff McQuillan. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on the TOEFL Podcast. The TOEFL Podcast is written and produced by Dr. Lucy Say. Your host is Dr. Jeff McQuillan. This podcast is copyright 2006 by the Center for Educational Development. TOEFL is a registered trademark of the Educational Testing Service, which does not endorse and was not involved in the production of this podcast.